A review lesson on and some practice on the idea of finding the main idea. Okay, so to find the main idea while you're listening or reading a text, you should be answering yourself questions. We're looking for a or a central idea. We're usually looking at an informative text, a nonfiction, true story text. Okay. And when they're written with a topic in mind. So, to remind you what a topic is, it's a 1 to 3 words that tells you the subject that the author is writing. So, for example, hurricanes is an example of a topic. It's 1 word, but I could take that topic and write an article that describes a certain thing about hurricanes. So, for example, you want to ask yourself, what is the author trying to say about the topic? And it should be a full sentence or phrase that you answer with, okay, in your head. So you ask yourself questions about what is the author trying to tell me about hurricanes, and I could write a paragraph about, for example, how much damage hurricanes can cause, how hurricanes are formed, or how hurricanes are named. And each of these is a central idea that could be used to write about hurricanes. Okay, so those are the questions you want to ask. What is the topic, and what is the author trying to tell me about the topic? So first example we're gonna do, I'm gonna read the passage. I'm gonna have you answer each question after each is read. And then I'm going to talk through what the correct answers should have been. Okay. The last 2 questions and answers you will do on your own. I will read them to you, but you will make your own selections. Okay. So, first example here, how were chocolate chip cookies invented? In 1937, Ruth Wakefield was trying to make her vanilla cookie recipe when she decided to add pieces of chocolate. Thinking they would melt into the batter, Wakefield was surprised when the chocolate kept its shape. These cookies were so popular with her Toll House Inn bed and breakfast customers that Wakefield ended up making a deal with Nestle Company to print her recipe on the back of the newly created chocolate chips package. In exchange, Wakefield received free chocolate chips for her life. So, what is the main idea of this reading passage? Is it A, chocolate chip cookies? B, chocolate chip cookies are good? C, the recipe for Toll House cookies is on the bag of Nestle's chocolate chips? Or D, how the chocolate chip cookie recipe was invented? What detail from the story best supports your answer? Is it A, Wakefield ended up making a deal with Nestle Company to print her recipe? B, Ruth Wakefield was trying to make her vanilla cookie recipe when she decided to add pieces of chocolate? C, in exchange, Wakefield received free chocolate chips for life? Or D, Wakefield was surprised when the chocolate kept its shape? So now that you've selected your answers, we're going to look at the correct answers. Okay, so the main idea for this reading passage was about how the chocolate chip cookie recipe was invented. That's what the main idea of the reading passage is. And the detail that best supports this, and this is where we're having trouble, is that Ruth Wakefield was trying to make her cookie recipe when she decided to add pieces of chocolate. So, what you should have done to answer this was to think about your answer, which was how the chocolate chip cookie recipe was invented, and then looking at the details that match. Okay, the first detail said Wakefield ended up making a deal with Nestle Company to print her recipe. That doesn't talk about how the recipe was invented. C says, in exchange, Wakefield received free chocolate chips for life. Okay, that does not talk about how the recipe was invented. And D said Wakefield was surprised when the chocolate kept its shape. Again, that's not talking about how she came up with the recipe. So the only answer that worked here was B. Okay. All right, let's try another passage. A rhinoceros is a large animal that lives in Southeast Asia and in Africa. Rhinos have either one or two horns on their snouts. These horns are made of keratin, which is what your fingernails and hair are made of. One interesting fact about rhinos is that they have 3 toes on their feet. Rhinos have keen senses of hearing and smell, but they have very poor eyesight. They've been known to charge trees, mistaking them for other animals. Rhinos are an endangered species. What is the main or central idea of this passage? Is it A, rhinoceros, B, information about rhinos, C, the rhino's environment, or D, how rhinos care for their young, so their babies? The next question says, which is a detail that supports the main idea? A, rhinos have either one or two horns on their snouts. B, one interesting fact about rhinos is that they have 3 toes on their feet. C, rhinos have a keen sense of hearing and smell, but they have very poor eyesight. Or D, all of the above. Okay, so here are the correct answers. The main central idea of the passage is information about rhinoceroses, okay? And they're just giving you general information. They talked about where they live. They talk about what their horns are made of. They talked about an interesting fact about their hearing and smell. So really about their bodies and where they're from, okay? So it's just general information about rhinoceroses, okay? So which is a detail that supports the main idea? All of the above was the correct answer. All of those details are information about rhinos, okay? All right. So this is one you're going to do on your own. I'm going to read it to you and it will pause so that you can answer each question one at a time, okay? During World War II, Richard Jones was a naval engineer who was working on a ship. One day, Jones was trying to make a meter that monitored powers on battleships. He started working with the tension springs when one of them dropped to the ground. The spring kept bouncing from place to place, and Jones realized that this could be a toy that children would love. Thus, the Slinky was created. What is the main idea of the passage? Is it A, Richard Jones was a naval engineer? B, working on tension springs? C, battleships? Or D, how slinkies were invented? Okay, what detail best supports your main idea? Is it A, one day Jones was trying to make a meter? B, the spring kept bouncing from place to place? C, Jones realized that this could be a toy that children would love, thus the Slinky was born? Or D, Richard Jones was a naval engineer who was working on a ship? Okay, last one. Meteorologists are scientists who study weather. Meteorologists use tools such as a barometer, a rain gauge, anemometers, weather balloons, satellites, and computers to take weather measurements and record them. Meteorologists predict the weather using satellite pictures, which help them know what types of weather patterns are coming to their area. Since weather generally moves from west to east, meteorologists note the current conditions of places to the west of their city as a good indication of what weather their city will be experiencing. So, what is the main idea of the passage? Is it A, what meteorologists do and how they do it? B, how computers help measure the weather? C, how weather moves from east to west? Or D, meteorologists? Okay, what details does not support your answer above? Is it A, meteorologists or scientists who study weather? B, since weather generally moves from west to east, meteorologists note the current conditions of places west of their city? C, meteorologists predict the weather using satellite pictures, which help them know what types of weather patterns are coming to their area? Or D, meteorologists use tools such as a barometer, a rain gauge, anemometers, weather balloons, and then it continues. Okay. Which detail does not support your answer above? Okay, that concludes the lesson. It will count for one of the makeup assignments. Thank you.